Jiminny is the conversation and revenue intelligence tool built for reps, managers, executives, and even your product team. It's the everything app that brings all of your data into one place. It's so beautifully designed, reps actually want to work in the platform, while executives get everything they need in the CRM. It's also one of the most powerful self-coaching platforms, helping reps get better every single day. Tom is on a mission to kill the close lost pick list and give people the full picture as to why you've won or lost a deal. In today's episode, Tom, founder and CEO of Jiminny, walks us through the product and how they're on a mission to help revenue teams be the best version of themselves. Really excited to have you here, Tom. Can't wait to dive in. I think our audience and our customers are really going to love what you have to show at Jiminny. And before we do that, though, I think something that's always interesting is hearing how you got Jiminny started, what gave you the inspiration for the idea, and how you got to where you guys are today, which is an unbelievable success story.
Yeah, first of all, pleasure to be here, guys. Thanks, Anthony. Thanks, Joe, for having me. I think the space that you guys are in, helping revenue teams become better, is something I'm really passionate about, and we all know how hard that gig is, just generally. So if you look a bit closer, I got a few more grey hairs in my beard that you can probably see on the camera. But I was an SVP of sales for 8 years in a scaling tech business, trying to scale sales. And the first time you do it, you don't know, you're learning, you're flying the plane while you build it, etc. And just the visibility. I'm going back now to like 2008, 9, 10. Everything was nowhere near as automated or anything at all. So that tough gig of running sales generally, but then trying to do it and seeing the gaps in the technology really inspired us to build Jiminny. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is definitely a tough gig. I think both Joe and I have been in seat leading sales teams, leading revenue teams before, and you're usually just struggling for any bit of data that you can get to help you win. I think it's the toughest job there is, and there's so much unknown that you have to be able to navigate through. So any bit of edge always goes a long way.
Yeah, I think often now, it doesn't matter what size the company is, they are more. You talk about getting your hands on data, they're often swimming in data. It's sometimes cutting through the noise, like which bit of data should I be looking at that's actually going to move the needle and make the difference. And that's something we definitely over the last few years try and work on with customers, is giving them focus on what's actually going to help them move the needle in their business.
100%. Yeah, we actually used Jiminny, or I used Jiminny as a customer at Assembly. So we got a chance to check out a lot of the ways that you help make the data more useful and digestible. And I think as we dig into the demo, everyone will get a chance to see it, but it does kind of clear some of the clutter out, because just getting a ton of data thrown at you isn't always the most useful.
Well, and I think as we go through, you can tell that it was developed by somebody who has done sales.
Yeah, totally.
And who has led sales teams. It's very, very thoughtfully designed, and I think really empathizes with the end users who would use the platform. Well, Tom, I think it'd be great to maybe, if you want to give our audience just a high-level overview, and then would love to hop in.
Yeah, absolutely. I can tell you a little bit about Jiminny as a company, what it's like to work with us. I'll share my screen and we'll kick off. So I think definitely in SaaS, and probably on the West Coast where you guys are, revenue intelligence would feel like something that a lot of people would know about, maybe not so much in other industries. But when we think about it, we definitely think about approaching it differently. And that's anyone watching today, I'd really want them to kind of take that away. So kind of table stake stuff that we feel is really important is, when we think about it, we think about capturing video, voice, and email. They are the three most important mediums. When you put them together, you get the most insights out. And probably the most important part, and I know Anthony and Joe, you want to go through it today, is thinking about it the other way around, not just integrating with the CRM, but having the AI live within the CRM. which is a different approach. We analyze the data, so you're taking like a high quality transcript, but creating summaries, action items, statistics, but pulling out risk and engagement. I think generative AI has pushed that on. We're big believers that it doesn't matter how much data you have, you still have to do something with it, otherwise you don't make change. So making sure you have the right tools to give 360 feedback, to pass insights to other departments is really important. But we may be recording sales teams, CS teams, BDR, SDR teams, but we definitely see Jiminny like as a business tool where the value is the whole company using it to help drive more revenue effectively. Yeah. Going back to like when we started, just quickly, we're a very mission driven company. Our focus is on the intelligence part of what we do, and we still feel there's loads more data to be mined from like video and voice calls. And we've been probably live with a product about 6.5, 7 years, but I'd say like half our customers are in the US, half are in the UK. And the things that we really focus on are like time to value, making sure people get return on investment really quick, and it's really simple and easy to kind of implement and use. But in terms of the demo that we're going to go through together today, I wanted to make it a little bit different. So rather than your classic sort of show and tell where we go product feature, I wanted to make it more about the teams and how the teams use it, if that's okay with you guys. So basically going back to our theme of the intelligence and how we do it differently. So we want to look at it from a user perspective, so operationally, and we again try and keep it quite simple. How are we automating their processes, saving them time, helping a sales rep or an AE to self-develop? So we'll talk through that. From a manager's perspective, there's two things for me. If you're a tactical like VP of sales, sales manager, where you're super busy, under a lot of pressure, is how are you getting best in class and most critical calls pushed to you in a workflow that works for you? And how are you intervening on deals where you're going to turn like the maybes into yeses? And then as you get more data holistically, how is the business really understanding? We talked about this before offline, guys, but are you tracking the things that are important effectively in the talk track? Are you then building out frameworks for the calls and the conversations? And then are you also making sure that a sales methodology followed? But they're all different things. But ultimately, we want every team, whether it's product or marketing, to be able to use the platform and get benefit from it.
This sounds great. Yeah, I think it'll really help to do it from the perspective of each role. And that's where I think the difference between Jiminny and other platforms really shines when you see how thoughtful it is for each role that you're in.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. All right. Do you want me to dive in, Anthony? All good?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Awesome. So going with the theme of the story and everything that you wanted to say. So when we started Jiminny, I'm going back to like the first designs, like I'm trying to rack my brain now, 2016, 2017, right? And everything was very kind of safe, blue, orange, green. Like if you went in the app exchange, right? Everything, because nothing was pink and nothing had a funny name, which is kind of like us. So maybe it was a bit creative, maybe we want to stand out, but generally when we built the app, and we're on probably like version 5 now, if you want to call it that, we took a lot of inspiration from B2C. So I wouldn't look at things necessarily in Salesforce. I'd look at stuff like Spotify, SoundCloud, Peloton, mobile, because I just think people were expecting a better experience. And I do believe for the end user, like if they love to look at it and it feels engaging, and of course you've always got to work on the UX and the UI because everything's in 2D. But we take a lot of inspiration from B2C. I want people to love it on web. I want people to love it on mobile the same.
I think a lot of people don't value that as much, but for a lot of us in knowledge work, if we're in tech, we're in sales, you're sitting behind your screen all day. And I always feel like whatever I'm doing, it has to feel like I'm doing something cool. Like I have to feel like, oh, I'm doing something really modern, really high tech. And I do want to like the aesthetics of something I'm using matter, even if sometimes I may even sacrifice a little function if it has that type of feeling that's tough to describe.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Like if you spend a lot of hours or time in a certain tool, that can be really important too. We also really obsess about like the mobile experience being really slick and great. You can have a quick look at that on Android and iOS easily as well. So cool. I'll jump into the demo. So I'll walk you through like the persona examples that we talked to, but I always like to break it down into two halves. So for those of you who are seeing like a revenue intelligence platform for the first time, it's always good to get your head around the integrations and how they work. I always call us like when I first spoke to investors and stuff like that, we're like a super connector. Like we connect to everything, right? So we connect to like Google Workspace and Office. We read your calendar. We import email directly from like Google or Office. We have a two-directional sync with the CRM. Then you go into pulling in all the video calls, the voice calls, everything else together, even up to text messages, depending on the integration. So what we're doing is the original idea was imagine like Spotify for your customer calls, that everything was in the cloud. You could see all of that data because the customer conversations are your most valuable asset. Our job now, people have all these, is like how to make that data even more valuable to a customer. Mm-hmm. So one of those key integrations, and I'm sure a lot of your customers use like Salesforce, there are other CRMs available. So we can actually like log activity, like log tasks and events, do data capture, but we actually have an install package of Salesforce too, and I'll kind of switch back and forward as you go through. But what that means is everything can go into Salesforce as a custom object. We call it like a Jiminny conversation. So we are one of the first players in the market to actually let you play a call within the Salesforce UI without actually leaving. So, you know, on an operational level, you know, people might be in Jiminny a lot, but if you're an exec or a CRO, you might just generally be in Salesforce and not have the time to go into another application. So the more we can put into Salesforce, the better. And there's huge advantages to that. You know, like if you're tracking certain keywords or phrases or a sales methodology, then that's going into Salesforce as a custom object too.
Yeah, one of the interesting things on this too is sometimes CS, like customer success or the sales engineer team, needs to get the conversations, but to your
Mm-hmm.
point, they'd have to go and get into a different system to be able to capture that. So I think it's helpful for the execs too, but you know, all the non-sales members that might be interacting with these customers.
Yeah, exactly. And then where you start to aggregate this, and we'll go through it later, we've even pulled like our deal view directly into the CRM. So again, can I understand, you know, why I'm winning and losing deals effectively without leaving the Salesforce experience at the same time? But I think one of the most popular things is that you're actually able to like run reports. So we have like out the box reports, so you can actually run win rates or other analysis and then layer Jiminny data on top, which can be really effective too. Mm-hmm. The one of the things, guys, we've done that in Salesforce. I think. Do you have many customers on HubSpot too? Do you have as many customers on HubSpot as you do on Salesforce?
Yeah.
We do. I'd say it's been growing. I think
Mm-hmm.
HubSpot's doing a really, really good job. They're getting a lot of market share right now, especially at the lower end of the market. But I'd say maybe 40% or so of our
Yeah.
customer base is on HubSpot right now.
Yeah, and I think they just updated their API recently, which has allowed you to do a lot more with it. So that experience we've shown you in Salesforce, we've had early access because of the amount of HubSpot customers we have, but we're going to be able to build a lot of that experience into HubSpot too, which is launching in the new year, I think.
Oh, that's really exciting. Yeah. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
probably one of my favorite views of Jiminny, of seeing that deal view and seeing it in the context of where things are in the pipeline.
Right. That's what people are trying to do, but they have to piece that all together manually right now.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So I'll talk you through like a use case of like how a customer would get best practice. So what we're doing before you go into a call is like we use AI to generate like themes and topics from the conversation. But a lot of the time, customers don't have time to do this, so we generate it for them, looking at their competitors, their websites, certain acronyms. We have templates for sales methodology. But the whole point is we're automatically tracking everything. Then there's different ways in which they can understand what's being said across calls. So you can set up like themes and topics, but you can also set up like scorecards as well. So what's the ultimate goal is that it's really easy to narrow down where do I look. So I don't know, if a customer is using BANT as an example, how can a sales leader understand how BANT is performing across that financial quarter across all teams? So in this example here, what you're basically seeing is like any 2-star BANT call where they're just not following the process on a discovery call, and that can be pushed literally like straight to Slack or anyone else. But the end result is it's not just you can go and give an individual bit of feedback, or coach an individual call and see which parts they did pick up or didn't pick up in the conversation. But it starts to become much more helpful than that, because over time, again, going back to that like BANT use cases, you can see, well, we're actually really good at covering like this part of BANT, right, budget, but on the authority side, as an example, let's just give it here. We're not that good at talking about like decision maker and stakeholders, and how can I actually help Tom get better at that? So, when I was talking earlier about having this data and doing something with it, we're really big believers that, like you have drill down in the charts and you're able to look at things individually. It might be telling you about the sales methodology, it might be telling you that you're following it, but then how are you making someone better? If that makes sense.
So, Tom, I know most sales teams are pretty competitive, and something that
Mm-hmm.
we'll normally build are leaderboards for, pipeline or closed deals. Do reps typically see how they're benchmarked on their calls, like from that view?
Yeah, I think there's three main ways you see people using it. Like, actually, still the most popular is like self-coaching. It's about 70% of listens, because people just get obsessed with preparing for their own calls, which is a great way to self-develop. So the reps that listen to themselves more than once a week have a 5% higher win rate than the ones that don't. We historically like see that in the data. So even without manager intervention or anything else, then you've got kind of manager-led coaching where they're like giving feedback, or you're automatically scoring it through the AI at the same time. And then a lot of customers also, they actually do peer-to-peer coaching, and we have certain modules around that. So sort of like giving feedback in smaller groups, but being able to structure it. So to like give you an example, on a coaching tab here, you could go to coaching focus. Often the problem is everyone gives too much feedback, right? Like if someone could give you 10 things you could do better with that call, that doesn't really, also make you feel great. But like making it easy to go, right, what was good, Anthony, about that call? What did you do? And what's the game changer? What's the one thing you'd improve this time? So it's actually more tangible feedback that's easier to digest, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think any time you can tap into that competitive nature, coaching nature, even winning as a team. I know sales teams like to win as individuals, but also win as a team and hit the company goals and make sure the team around them is working well. I think anything you can do to support that always goes a long way. And that's a really interesting stat about reps who listen to their calls at least once a week, improving their win rate. Makes a lot of sense, but
Totally.
I haven't heard that before.
Yeah, Tom, one other thing too that I thought was interesting as you were talking through this is we're dealing with a lot of sales teams that are growing really quickly. So ramp is a big part of this. And I think one other use case of these is new hires and kind of being able to like go through best practices from other reps. So I found that to be really useful, when we were a customer because we were bringing on so many new people and being able to onboard all of those things is kind of hard to do live. So I thought that the playlists and all of that was also a really good way to get people ramped up.
Yeah, if you think about so going back to persona, now I talked through like a use case with the methodology and the tracking, so you understand it. Like there, you were talking there, Joe, I think about like having playlists, right? So you can like break them down into folders, and they can be automatically shared. You can understand what's gone on there. That's a real easy way to do it. And then also we have like actually live coaching. So you can join it's quite rare, you can join like a video call incognito. So not many people have that, but people absolutely love that. So it could be a busy CEO or CRO joining a one-off call. Sometimes it's not um, always appropriate, like it could be an outnumbered ratio or whatever. So, and if you've got a new rep and they're onboarding, it's like a sports match. If you know the result, you watch the whole game. But if you're onboarding, it's quite more engaging if you know the call's actually happening there and then, if that makes sense. So you actually just join a live stream and you're like 15, 20 seconds behind, and you can join that video call like incognito.
That's really cool.
That is cool,
Yeah.
especially for those
Yeah.
onboarding reps. And Tom, I'm sure since you've led sales teams, what we always find, you get that sales productivity model. Okay, this company wants to double, triple their growth, so they're going to hire an army of sellers. Typically, the biggest limiting factor to that is going to be hiring. Can you get the people in the door quick enough? And then, like Joe said, can you get them ramped quick enough? And
Right.
everything else tends to come in play. Like usually those teams can pump enough marketing dollars to get the pipeline, but can you get people in the door and productive quickly? So anything to help that goes a huge way in like that top-down productivity model.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think like just one example really is like, do you need to listen to a whole call, or can you just listen to the 2 minutes that are most relevant? So that can be like popped in a playlist, it can be shared externally, or you can share it to like a specific Slack channel, or anything that you want. And that's just like a really easy way to like snip the part of the conversation based on something that was said specifically. You can jump straight to it.
That's great. Yeah, share it with product, customer success.
Yeah.
It's great.
If you're if you're like a rep, so you're like, oh, okay, everything's in Salesforce automatically, don't have to take notes, everything's there. I can see it directly in the CRM, right? And then you're in Jiminny, I can what we've started to do is use like generative AI. And I think it's really interesting what you can do further. So we actually have something called like Ask Jiminny, and the whole concept of this is like basically a magic wand. So you can use it in different places. You can use it in different parts of our product, and eventually you'll be able to use it in other platforms. But what we start to do is take more subjective things and understand, well, how engaged was that call generally? What is the risk? Like, what did you miss? It's almost like automated coaching feedback, and even writing like a follow-up email based on the tonality of the call, to save the rep time. So going back to that use case of how do you automate everything? How do you make it save time? How do you help them like self-develop?
Love it. Love it. Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah, and then that concept of like best in class and most critical calls, like it's for me, it's always quality over quantity, guys. Like sometimes people freak out like if they see a product like this and think they've got to like use it like every hour of every day, or they've got to like use every feature. But it's like, what are you doing that moves the needle? And I think as we go into like the manager and the exec use case, that's like even more relevant. So like when I talked about being a super connector earlier and having everything like the power of the conversations, but then also understanding it against what was said or not said in the transcript. Yeah. Really understanding based on the different topics of conversation, the different call types, but then being able to score it, but being able to understand the different stages that you have in your sales process, and Jiminny automatically maps to them. So like really going, well, when it ends up in the closed loss bucket or the closed won bucket, how are you then pushing calls into that space? So I gave you a little example earlier, but if you could see that like BANT example is basically being able to drill down and make sure that these calls are pushed to you. So as soon as they happen, so in this example, we actually call them nudges. So I believe, do you know when you get like a lot of notifications from one bit of software and you start to switch off and you're like, oh, it's this daily digest, this daily email. And I'm like, I don't read it anymore. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Oh, for sure. I think we've
Yeah.
experienced that. We're also in like a million customer environments too. So we get that times all the customer tools that we're managing and working with as well.
Yeah. So like people live in Slack now, not email, right? I think a lot of people do. And even most companies that are a little bit more seasoned or been around the block a little bit longer, they're still like using Teams and stuff like that. So I would say like we set up nudges and we don't train like, oh, this button's here. Like on the first session, anyone's taught how to use Jiminny, whether it's online or in person, it's like, right, you're going to set up your first nudge and we're going to start pushing the right data that's most important to you. But the cool things I like about this is we set a time and a frequency on it, because you need to be changing the nudges that you get. based on what's important to your business. And that changes all the time, as we know, right? So, for example, like this band example again is like, right, I want this in Slack. Some people prefer email, and I want it instantly for the next month, right? So you're choosing the frequency that you want that call push to you, and you're choosing how long you want that focus to be. Make sense?
Yeah,
Totally makes sense.
really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So a new rep can set up a nudge. They really want to get good on qualifying opportunities, set it up for BANT, and then that'll hit them up every time after a call.
Yeah, and it could be sometimes the simplest thing, like, right, if I talk more than 60% of the time on a DC, send me a nudge, you know, like or if I'm not being patient enough and I'm over talking and I'm not keeping myself on mute long enough, you can set it up about anything that you want. We can pull in fields from things like SalesLoft, Outreach, whatever engagement tool they're using, and make sure we can do it based on any disposition or anything that's relevant.
Right. Yeah, it looks like you promote a lot of self-coaching in this too, which is it's pretty powerful, especially for the companies we work with that are spread very thin. Not all the time you have a frontline manager that's able to listen to all of the calls. So I think it's cool how that's just easy to set up if you're getting started and, don't have a ton of support.
Yeah, look, I've seen the data for like 6 or 7 years. If you have the best VP of sales, VP of customer success, they're going to do 20% of your feedback and development, because it's impossible otherwise, right? They can't
Right.
they can't do any more than that. They've got a team of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, depending on what's going on. So the self to self and peer is just as important to kind of crack it.
100%.
Yeah, I think usually these like category solutions are designed for the managers only. But I really
Hmm.
like delegating the coaching to the ICs. And I think people want that too. This isn't like features people don't want to do. I mean, I think people take their job seriously. They take their career seriously. They want to win. It's going to hit their commission checks if they can sell better. So giving them the tools
Hmm.
to, enhance their skills, I think it's something that people want. Rather than seeing this as like,
Yeah.
oh, great, our VP of sales brought this in to spy on me and like hit me over the head when I do something wrong. It's like, no, this is your self coaching platform to help make you better every day.
Yeah, it's, a lot of the time it's the way you frame it, right? Ultimately, and the way that you train it in. I think like you go back. I don't know when do we say SaaS started? When Salesforce blew up? I don't know, 20 years, right? So you take like Gen 1 of like SaaS tools, like the first decade. So many of them were just built for the buyer, right? Like it'd be dashboards in products or whatever. So when we came along in like had the idea like 2015, 2016, so maybe like second decade of SaaS, if you want to call it that. I felt like we deliberately built it rep first, because we thought if we can get the rep to love it and the rep to use it every day, then it solves a problem for the manager. And then if it solves a problem for the manager, it solves a problem for the exec, and then we can build. So we did reverse engineer it intentionally. But I think over time, we've tried to broaden out over every use case, and we'll kind of, I guess that segues nicely into that now.
No, that's great. That's great. No, I think if you can get
Mhm.
adoption, that's the biggest problem we see is getting teams to adopt the technology that gets brought in. So driving that first. And then, of course, we'll get all the data for the managers and all the features too. But I think the hardest to capture is that end user.
Yeah, I think which is a good thing. I think we've become almost like mission critical. Like, if, for example, if I don't know, say another integration went down, and then it missed the recording, and then we had to re-pull it in, because the system is down. If someone's recording's not there, they like might freak out now because it's like, what, I rely on it, so it becomes almost like super important, which I think is a good thing overall generally. Um, Cool. So like going on to like the next part is one of the things, whether it's product marketing exec, is like to aggregate this data and to really understand it. So like the normal things you'd expect to see, like how well adopted is the product, different things like that. what statistics kind of we're pulling out. So when you look at someone's talk time or you look at the number of questions they ask, that's great on it. We're talking about the self-development, but then from a leader's perspective, it's like, well, on a discovery call, what's the optimal amount of questions we need to ask? What's the team average? So if Tom's really good, how's Harry getting better? And then how do we make Harry better, right? So it's about being able to drill down. Again, like it's all very well and good having a report telling you Harry's not as good at Tom as asking questions, but you've got to make Harry better, right? And that's the bit that is still important too, no matter how much AI or automation that you have.
Yeah, and it really is. The top reps are going to perform, whether you help them or
Hmm.
not, and they're going to do well. But it's
Hmm.
how do I get the whole machine, the people who are right at the median to get into that next level? That's what creates massive results across an organization. Um, so yeah, being able to focus in and see exactly why can really turn into um, a significant impact on the results too.
Yeah, and when you start to like aggregate all these topics together, like customers have some great use cases with this. So like I'm giving you some really simple runs now, but like, you talked about new reps coming in, Joe, and being like, okay, well, when are they actually talking about price? People get they've got a lot to remember. It's not easy. They maybe have a new product. They're wanting to impress, do a good job. Is like, or how early are they talking about a certain topic, and are they talking about it too early, right, in the conversation? So like, when are these topics getting talked about, and like really understanding that, and getting alerted about it too, because all of that can be done through the nudges in the reports here, and like even companies really understanding, well, is the sales rep just saying we need to build this integration next, or are customers telling us that? And where's the reality? Where's the truth? And you still spend lots of money and time on training. So if you've got like a value prop and you want to get it across, like how well are generally people talking about that, as an example, and how well is that like covered generally? I was just on a call earlier today and they just got a big focus on CS, and they were just talking to me about like, oh, we really want to understand like launch, rollout, but like we just want to know which reps are talking about it well, how are they talking about it? So you need to be able to jump on these things pretty quickly. And they change from time to time, right? Um, you're constantly evolving your talk track, your presentation, everyone's developing new features. So it doesn't matter what size company you are, these things are constantly moving.
Yeah, launching new products, of course, all kinds of things. And one thing too, a lot of customers we work with, their sales cycles are can be a bit long. So we'll work with
Hmm.
customers that have maybe 3, 6, 9 month sales cycles. And when you bring on a new rep, you don't want to wait 9 months to see if they've closed a deal or to see if they're doing well. And
Hmm.
you won't have close one data to see if they're performing. And it's tough to know if the pipeline data they're putting in is real or not. Um, but this is a good way to see like, okay, are they at least doing the right activities? Are they pitching the right way? Are they having the right types of conversations? So you can start to
Hmm.
gauge, is this rep ramping or performing well earlier? And then you can make a decision. Because if not, then you're going to burn 9 months when you could get a new one in earlier.
Yeah, I actually talked about this, guys, recently, a presentation I did, and I think the collision of two things that have massively changed in the last sort of 6 or 7 years in sales. Probably the two biggest changes for me, definitely post COVID, is obviously the amount you do online, and then having call intelligence, like meeting intelligence, to actually use in calls, right? That's a big game changer, kind of like how you sell and then how you analyze it. And then also, because of the whole in call thing and less in person, the whole kind of buyer enablement piece. So the fact that salespeople don't close deals, buyers do, and that the content and how you're tracking that content and what the touch points that you do, which is, the calls are hugely important, but it's just as equally important what you're doing outside the call. So combining those two things together, and I think if a modern sales team isn't analyzing and tracking those two things as one, then you probably haven't got an up-to-date sales process. Not to be too harsh, but that if you're not thinking about the intelligence in call and the touch points and buyer enablement outside, then you're going to be leaving money on the table, I think, ultimately.
Yep.
I
I
don't think
remember
it's harsh at all. I think it's just accurate.
it's table stakes now. I remember like 5, 6 years ago when I felt like some of the meeting recorders were coming to market. You kind of had to like gut check if
Mhm,
people were okay with it. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh
Like,
yeah, people were
hey,
nervous. Like, oh, should I? Or
mhm.
is this call too like confidential? Or
yeah,
can I speak freely if I have a recorder on it?
totally. I think that's changed a ton. And now it's like, all right, how do we, now that it's table stakes, how do we actually leverage this? So, um, yeah, it's pretty cool. And especially in this view, Tom, I mean, like, this is what a manager's trying to figure out. Like, what are people talking about and how are they progressing the deals? And right now in Salesforce or any CRM, you just kind of see what's in there, which isn't always a lot. And conversations are happening,
Mhm.
but they're shown as an activity. And there's not much you can do to dig in. So anyway, I think this type of a view is really what you're trying to map all these conversations with.
Yeah, someone said to me as a joke the other day, they're a CRO and a VP of sales on the quiz, says I spend more time looking at the pipeline than I do my wife and kids. Um, but it's true statement to some extent. But yeah, look, this is where people's time and attention goes, but then they're also not sometimes getting the reality there. So why we designed this, what you're seeing here is how do you forecast accurately, spend time on the deals that matter, but then also spot those coaching opportunities. So like if you're like a NFL football team or you're like a Premier League soccer team, you're going to do a retrospective, right, of your match that you lost. You're going to do a retro. But I think often people won't look at a closed lost deal and put the microscope under it and really understand why did we lose that deal? What actually happened? So not just within Salesforce, but ask Jiminny, like I showed you earlier with generative AI on the call level. We've started to do this on the deal level. So we're training prompts on specific sales use cases to be like, why did we lose? What product reasons? What sales rep performance? What process shortcomings? What stage did we actually lose it at? How did we lose it? And often the opportunity for me gets closed lost way after it was actually lost. And then it's reliant on the salesperson who's generally a bit emotive about it and worried about their win rates. So one way we're trying to help business and help salespeople is like take this data, summarize it faster, because it's a new feature, and then almost start to automate it in Salesforce too.
So I want to make sure I understand that because I think that's
Mm-hmm.
unbelievably powerful. So it's
Mm-hmm.
going to take a look at all the conversations that aggregated and happened within the context of a deal, and then it'll use
Yeah.
that context to tell you
Mhm.
why it was lost.
Yeah, let me just go back to a view here. So you've got basically going back to the different use cases. So what you can see is the rep and the customer. You can pull any fields in if you're an admin that you want from the opportunity layout. So the information that's relevant to you. And what it's doing is it's reading all of the emails, all of the calls, all of the meetings. It's reading the CRM fields too. It's identifying the deal risk that you set as parameters per team. So like if you had the time to read 50 emails and you know, listen to 5 calls or even read the summaries of 5 calls, you could probably have a good idea of what happened. But what Jiminny does on an open deal, as an example, is does very similar to it does to a call. So what are the concerns and blockers? What risk is there? And when you're going through a deal review, what you want to understand is what are the red flags? What are the risks? How do we turn the maybes into a yes? And if there's been more activity since, you can just literally update it. And within seconds, we'll analyze the newest call or the newest email. So you get an updated prompt.
Tom, question: how would you compare the accuracy of looking at every single call, every single email, every single text, all of the data in Salesforce, and then aggregating that and giving an intelligent response to see why you lost a deal versus a rep selecting a closed lost reason pick list?
Well, I think we're only at the start of this journey, right? So you can see how quickly it just looked at that data for you. Um, so,
Silly question. I mean,
well,
it's just
not
I'm
no.
thinking as a manager, it's insane that you're people are literally looking at self-reported closed loss data, which is never gonna blame the rep or the conversations or what actually happened in the process, it's going to say something like, "Oh, missing a product feature," or "They didn't have budget," or "I wasn't able to articulate the value." And then people are
Yeah.
making decisions off that data. They're making changes based on that data.
Yeah, that's definitely one of our missions. It's probably the greyest. It's one of the key RevOps metrics, and then it's probably the greyest, right? Someone joked with me the other day. They changed. This is a senior RevOps person in a big business, so they just put pink blancmange on the top of a pick list, and it got picked like 20% of the time. So people weren't even looking at what they picked when they closed lost. Like you put like a trick one in there, but like I
It's
think
criminal.
they're binary anyway, right? Like for me, you've got cause and effect. So it's like, not to be too morbid, but actually a non-exec director taught me this one day, but like cause and effect, like, you might die of a heart attack, but you stop breathing or whatever. So, but the analogy is like, okay, well, we didn't have this product that this other company had, and the effect was they went with Y competitor. Yeah. Or like, so you're trying to break it down, but there's no, I think the answer is there's never kind of one reason you lose a deal, and that's why you've got to do it. But I think one of the goals for us is to get to the headline and then automate it to Salesforce. But I think the answering of your question here is one of the things that our team are working on at the moment is Ask Jiminny gives you such rich data on each prompt. So let's take, for example, close lost, yeah, and we talk about, right, in a closed loss scenario, how did we lose, why did we lose, what are the process gaps. We can now use generative AI to machine learn all of this data. We want to be able to spit out a report at the end of the quarter telling you the main themes and then giving you actions as RevOps, as sales leaders to do it. Because I think this information is great and you can analyze a deal, which is awesome. It's super helpful. You can do a retro, all of that. But again, to be even more helpful to the customer, or as aspiring to be, is like how do we aggregate it and then create actions from it. So I think that's one of the things that we're going to work on next. We are working on. Mm-hmm.
Tom, this is so helpful for startups too, because a lot of the product roadmap, I think, is driven by this, or it should be,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you're targeting the right people. How have you seen
Yeah.
product work with this? What's the feedback loop that they're using just to like get insight on what to build next?
Yeah, I think one of the things that they do generally, like there's two ways. So setting up nudges on certain things that are important to them that they want to see from a product perspective, from a marketing perspective. So say you roll out a new features called, widget X, right? Then you can automatically have them push to Slack and tell you what's going on with that feature. Is it resonating? And then looking at it from a report as well. Are the guys even talking about this new feature? But then really understanding um, when you lose and dissecting a lost deal based on like what resonated in the talk track, what didn't resonate in the talk track. So we actually have something, guys, called like insight seats. So if you're like product and marketing, you can actually get full access for the platform, but we don't charge you. So you actually get to have the whole business on it,
Oh,
which I
that's
think is
big.
a positive. It's a little bit different to the rest of the market. Mm-hmm.
That's very generous. That's a generous feature.
Mm-hmm.
It's really cool stuff, Tom. I think that's a big gap, like you said. And I think it's important as the company gets bigger, but I feel like as it gets bigger, the lost reasons are more about the rep. And I think when it's earlier, it's about the rep, but it's also heavily about the product when it's a brand new product they're bringing to market. So I feel like it's just at its
Mm-hmm.
peak usefulness for product between like Series A and Series C, just so you're,
Yeah,
building the right stuff to grow quickly enough.
yeah, I agree. I think you don't in the early days of a company, they know they're going to lose more opportunities even at high, but they won't even worry about their win rate, right? But
Right.
we see companies, with two, three sales reps on HubSpot, uh, becoming Jiminny customers all the time, to CX call centers on Salesforce with 200, 300 agents, right? So the use case does vary, but they would still use the deal view. They would still use the same features. They just might use them for kind of different reasons ultimately.
Right.
Hmm.
right? And then if you're a PM, you launch a new feature, you set up a nudge, and then you'll just get
Hmm.
updated as the team talks about it to customers. I think
Yeah.
that's another just
So
game
timely
changer.
too.
Yeah.
So timely.
Hmm.
Very
Yeah.
cool.
One of the things, guys, is when you implement this, like I think sometimes you want like we're quite well known for like plug in and play, time to value, ROI, make it easy, make it simple. And of course, all of that is very true, and you should be able to do it in a couple of sessions where we do a lot of the heavy lifting. But at the same time, you can't kid the customer that if they haven't had this technology before, that there's not change management or they don't want to embed it into the culture, right? So, like, for me, it's a balance of the two things, but we look at customer experience slightly differently. So, what happens inside the tech is as important, like, for me, outside of the tech. So, like you guys are there to help people, right, with revenue operations. Sometimes people have nobody. Sometimes they have a team that might be a one person team. Even in a bigger company, they might have two people, but they actually need a whole team, right? You see all different scenarios. But so we take this away from the CSM. So we have like four core layers, but we have a implementation specialist that is just technical. Things like all the integrations, how they work, how they tick, what they want people to use, how they want to set stuff up. And we don't really involve the CSM. We just make sure that our CX ops team takes care of that effectively for the customer. And a lot of the time, if your company's like SMB or mid market, they'll want a lot of help because they're time poor. Then we have an enablement team, and then depending on the size or the proximity of the customer, we'll do like live workshops. So they could be in person if a company wants us to go to their head office. They could be on Zoom, and even doing custom product tours with things like user pilot. So rather than your generic out of the box tour, a customer will go to us, well, I want these three things to focus on first. So we'll build like a custom tour out. So we try and make it as interactive as possible. Then I was a salesperson. I was a VP of sales. I just think generally people can not that they're impatient. It's just like salespeople got target. They're under pressure. They're busy. If they want to know something about a product or it's new, or they've got a question, they just want us to get the answer now. So we make sure all of our support chats are answered in under 1 minute. And that really helps with adoption engagement, knowing that we can drive people, capture them in that first 30 days where it becomes a habit. And then if all of these three things are taken care of, our CSMs can be much more tactical and strategic. And I won't sugarcoat it, but hold people accountable to evolving using the product and making sure that we're focusing them on using the right bits of data at the right time.
That is that response time is so impressive. Um,
Hmm.
I'd love to at some point on another one dive into how you've operationalized that. But no, there's so much to the platform too. So having a partner like a CSM be there with them, knowing, hey, do you need to leverage this for your product team, leverage this for your CS team, guiding them on the key points to use and the insights they should be leveraging. That's a great way to get the most out of the product. And I appreciate that you've taken such a human approach to it because it it, it is hard to just get technology adopted across the board without somebody on the other side helping you and caring about your success.
Yeah, exactly. I think so there's different approaches, right? We split like any business will do, like split customers up into like SMB, mid market, But I think for most of customers, SMB and mid market, our CS teams say they only have 15 or 20 minutes meetings max. So they only ask for 15 or 20 minutes of their time. And it's just like sort of wham, bam, we're going to get this done, guys. Because like I think everyone's got a bit of Zoom fatigue. They spend too long talking to people. They're not in the office every day or not as many days as they can. The world's changed. So we try and take very little of their time and then try and give them a big return on it. But I think you have got to be creative and adapt a little bit now. If you expect the customer to get on a call with you for an hour, really, they only got 8 hours in a day, 40 hours in a week. It's tough, right? To ask them for an hour of their time, even if they love your product and they is a great customer, right?
Yep. We're all about the speedy meetings here too. So we get that. We get that. Well, Tom, this was so awesome. I just again feel like a lot of teams who, I mean, everyone at this point has to have a solution in place to be able to record the conversations they're having. And you guys just took it to the, 10x what you can do with that. So I'm really excited to get this out there. I thought it was really cool diving into some of those views too. So
Yeah,
great.
very cool. I can't wait to get in front of our customers. I can't wait for our audience to take a look. I mentioned it at the beginning, but I think it's just so thoughtfully designed and intuitive, and you could tell it was built by people who had been in your shoes. So the features, the way it's organized, the way it looks and feels, you could tell somebody's done the job before. So congratulations. I mean, amazing platform, amazing success up until now, but I think we're just really, really impressed and excited to share.
Yeah, awesome guys. Look, thanks for having me on. I hope it was helpful, and yeah, um, I hope it gives someone some ideas, some inspiration, and hopefully a benefit for you people.
I'm sure it will. Sure will.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
See you on the
Appreciate
next
it.
one.
Thanks, guys. All right, see you soon. Bye, bye.